the bad point, right? Maniac, what was your bad point here?
So for the bad point, I picked the faveN to BiG move. And I want to put some context into this.
So for people who don't know, we did this last week, but as a good move. I think it was actually Maui pick, maybe even. We did this as like a great move because at the time, a quick rundown was like faveN looked really good in tier 2. BiG needs more firepower after losing to Antares, blah, blah, blah. You know, it all seemed like a slam dunk, basically. So what's your angle? How is this a bad for you?
So the problem I have with it is not faveN joining BiG, because I think faveN is a good individual and is great for them. I think it's a step back on what BiG were trying to do to achieve success, right? They had Antares, which was an international player who was very skilled. They doubled back trying to speak German with Gade. That didn't work out at all. So now they go back staying in the German circuit. They want to keep speaking German. Whereas I believe, unfortunately, because some of these people I consider my friend, unfortunately, I think only Sursen and tabseN can play at the top level in that team. And that is it. That's the end. I know that the high caliber performing BiG in the middle of the online period was number one with Keto and with Tizian. Okay, great. I acknowledge at some point it happened, but that is it. That was just it. I don't believe that Keto and Tizian can remain at the top. I don't think they belong in a tier 1 anymore. I think they could be extremely good players for the tier 2. They probably have a lot of experience. They're probably very selfless. They have blah, 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 blah. A lot of other qualities that we list when someone is not good enough. But that's just it. I think this roster, if they want to go back to being at the top, should have gone international. I think that Sursen and tabseN can do it. faveN, all good. I'm happy for faveN. He's strong. He was always strong in the German scene. He gets an update now, an upgrade, and he can fight. That's great. I just don't like the philosophy behind it. It's BiG trying to say, listen, we're going to go back to full German, and we believe in the core. And I unfortunately don't. I don't believe anymore in that core. I think they have shown their limits many, many times in many different tournaments. And the BiG that would have deep runs tournaments is unfortunately over.
Okay.
What do you think, Maui?
All right. So if I get this right, your bad isn't the move itself. It's just
exactly. It's the philosophy behind it.
Okay.
It's the fact that it's just a minus gate plus faveN. Whereas I believe that if you're BiG, you have to rebuild way deeper. If you're hoping to have your cards and go to the top level again, that's just a timid move. I believe that is not going to make any great difference. That's my take on it.
Okay. I will say this. So that was my good point. Last show, and I definitely like the move in general. I think that actually moving to German is going to elevate the play of probably make things easier for tabseN. As soon as they switched back to German, tabseN started playing better. His stats got better. It seemed like he was just able to focus more on probably the micro around him a little bit. It's when you switch back to your native tongue, I think things do just get easier. I will say that to build off of your point, Tizian has been just terrible in 2021. Like that, it's incredibly disappointing to see where he's fallen to. I think I'll push back on Keto just a little bit because I think that he sometimes has to be the first in entry guy. Sometimes it's not like he has completely shit rolls on CT all the time, but I think that T side he has a rough job. But I think Tizian is definitely the weakest link for me because he does play the same spots as Rops on a lot of T sides, and yet he's by far the worst player on this team. So I think that he could be doing so much better for his position. And yeah, you probably would have to go international. I'm just not as familiar with maybe who could play that role in the German space. But if there's anybody out there, I mean, maybe someone even from the BiG Academy, or maybe even someone, I don't know. There's people in Meisterschaft that are actually pretty decent sometimes, but they probably do need to inject a little bit more life into this roster. The faveN move, I think, can actually still propel them to heights once again if they are able to ride off of the honeymoon phase. But I think that the Tizian thing actually kind of did check me there a little bit because I don't know what the hell happened to him, because I think he was like a decent player in 2020, that 0.97 guy with the worst shit rolls possible. But now that he's like a 0.88 player, that's just terrible. You can't win games if someone's actually that bad. Like that's kind of where we are today in modern Counter-Strike, that even an IGL putting up a 0.88 for a tournament probably means you're not going to come in the top 4.
Here's the trouble, is I actually think the points you've made all make perfect sense and do actually make this move as a net overall approach potentially negative. Like, for example, if you rephrase it this way, it's not that faveN's bad and he shouldn't join BiG. It's who they are not signing that could have been in his position that actually contributes to this topic. And also the idea that it doesn't fundamentally address some of the bigger problems in their team. It just brings in a bit more skill, which, as I said about the example with Furia, look, it'll make your style work better. But at the end of the day, if you've got problems, like, the problem's still going to be there at some level, right? So my issue is this. One, I agree. If you're making a move, and it's not like, here's the difference. A single player move, assuming it isn't literally like, Simple or fucking Nico coming over. A single player move is more like what we've got now, we want to make as good as possible. So if you're like the fourth best team in the world and you do that one great move, you might become the best team. That makes sense. It doesn't take a team that's fundamentally somewhat busted and totally fix everything, though. There's no one move in the world, I don't think. Even great in-game leader usually won't do that. So usually those moves, and I agree, you need two. You usually need two players because you need to essentially totally change the structure of the team and add a couple of players that do things that you weren't doing in the mix. So they haven't done that, and that would have been a player like Keto or Tizian. Obviously, one of those would have been the one to go. So I have to say, I do think that the core element, this is the downside though. Basically, I'm going to spin it this way. The reason why I viewed this move as a good is because I look more from the perspective of the BiG organization and the players in BiG and what I think they're envisioning as the team. And the problem goes like this. The reason they're not going to remove two players, and especially not those two players, including Tizian, is because I think the philosophy of the BiG team goes like this. By default, we of course want to speak German because it means we will have a better comprehensive ability to communicate. We want to use communication as an advantage because we want to be a very tactical team. We want tactics to be our edge over other squads, and there's a lot of squads that are international squads that are just skilled players. The Mouse Sports of the world, which used to be a German team, is a great contrast. That's not in any way a tactical squad. That's just a squad of skilled players from around the world. So that's what BiG could be, right? So I think what happens with BiG is their logic is we're going a different route. We're going the route of like Ents a few years ago, Renegades. We're going a route where in theory you have players from one region, but you just make it that if they mesh well enough, it'll overcome that they're not the most skilled players. So the problem is, in that scenario, you're not going to throw away players you've had for years and years and years. If you know people who believe in that idea of like a whole systematic approach to the game, it's really complicated. So to remember it all and remember everyone's position relative to the other ones and what you were doing, and to be able to call up strats from 6 months ago, you have to have a guy who's played years, unfortunately. You can't bring a guy in from FPL yesterday. He doesn't know anything about your playbook. He knows nothing about your vision of the game. And if you ever talk to the big guys, they're not selling you some like Astralis fucking PR wolf tickets. They really do have a whole vision of how they think the game should be played. Tabson himself basically is some sort of fucked up living avatar of God B's philosophy on Counter-Strike, as far as I can tell. And this is the last point which I have to make, which goes like this. Even though if I had to make this team and it's my hierarchy of values, I'd make it like Mouse Sports tomorrow. I would break it open. We'd be speaking English. I'd bring in a couple of really skilled youngsters, a la Sprout, Ents, etc., as these teams always do. And I'd try and just pump it up and I'd try and make it in 3 months we're going to be as good as we can be. The downside is, though, I don't think that's in any way the philosophy. I think that's totally counter to what BiG's doing. And most importantly, if you do that, BiG itself instantly ceases to exist, because why is Tabson playing there? As far as I can tell, Tabson has gone out of his way to put himself in this team, in this situation, and he clearly plays for reasons other than just lift trophies. He wants to like lift a trophy in a very specific way with a very specific set of people. So unfortunately, I think it essentially just, even though I agree competitively, if it's a football manager, I'd make the move tomorrow to make it like an international squad. We'd bring in some young skilled players and we'd be cooking with gas. The problem is I think essentially that's like antithetical to what BiG want the team to be. But I agree. I think overall, if you ever wanted BiG to have a chance to be number one again, it isn't going to happen. That's just a weird thing that happened in 2020 and will never come close to happening again, in my opinion.
I want to.
Yeah, come on.
I'll add a little fun fact about Tabson. I think he's one of the most likable people in the space, and I just found this out because we interviewed the IGL of the academy team, the BiG academy team, yesterday, and he said that even after like 12 hours or whatever of practice for Tabson, he's still willing to work with the academy team for a couple of hours. So he is mega invested in the German space. Like it's really admirable what he's doing. I think he probably wants to build up someone on that team. Probably, if people want to know, it's going to be Aqua. They listed him as a 6-man for a couple of BiG's tournaments that had possible substitutes, and Aqua is going to be the guy that probably replaces Tizian or Keto in my eyes. So if you want anybody to look out for, keep an eye on him.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I agree with you, Duncan. Definitely, they have a philosophy, they have an idea how they want to approach the game, and this isn't the 5 skilled player playing default Counter-Strike winning. The problem is, I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen any depth tactically from that big squad when they were all speaking German. That's the issue that I have. Even when BiG was actually performing great in some of these games, it was tabseN, Sursen catching on fire, Kido eventually, as Maui was saying, from time to time having a good job on the secondary upper. But that was relatively basic Counter-Strike. A few good ideas here and there, a good understanding of the game, because I think tabseN has that. What I don't think tabseN is he's no whatever Kerrigan at the top or existence 10 years ago. It's just not the case. He can understand the game. He has a good vision for the game, a good feel for it. I don't believe they will create strategies that just define the way we play Counter-Strike. I don't believe that's the case. So if you want to play that kind of Counter-Strike, you need good pieces. Because you're not going to outsmart your opponent by doing things that we haven't seen ever. Sure, a gimmick here and there, but it's not the DNA of the BiG we have seen the last few months. So that's the problem I see. I see a conflict between the intention of playing a deep, strategized Counter-Strike, and then you need someone that speaks German. I will agree to that. But I see a problem with what I have seen from BiG in the last months. I just haven't seen it. So that's my issue. But, prove me wrong.
I really think that Toby brought so much to this roster that they're not getting with the new coaches. I think Toby was probably the reason that they reached the heights that they did. And Gobby is now focusing on Valorant too, so he's not able to dedicate enough time. I don't know. We don't need to get into all the minutiae.
No, but you are right, mate. If you notice, basically, when he left, as far as I know, he left at the very beginning of 2021, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, as soon as he left, they basically just fell off a cliff and were never the same BiG again. And if you ever saw, there was actually an episode, a lot of that content, the shoulder content wasn't that good. But for Flashpoint 2, when we used to do that weekly show where me and Monty sort of did an impromptu talk show, go and watch the episode with the Toby guy and you will realise, and also I did a Strapbook episode, this guy basically, as much as people put it all on tabseN, he was massively influential over that team and was basically like a slave driver. He used to be super strict with people, very stereotypically German, and had a systems-based approach. It was basically what you'd imagine, but you could see how it was a positive for the team. And unfortunately, my vibe was when he stepped away because he was burned out or whatever, the team never looked the same since. They've been trying to chase the shadow of that, but they've never really been the same BiG.
I love the line in that where Toby was something about his surname. People of my surname always woke up late. They always got to their appointments late. But you know what? One day I just decided I'm gonna go on time. I'm gonna be on time now. Now my surname means that we're gonna be on time, and that's just how it is now. It's okay, this guy mastered volition.
Yeah, you have to realise, unironically, because this is how German they are in BiG, they were operating on that fucked up logic. You know where people say, early is late because, no, on time is late because early is on time. That fucked up thing that people say. They unironically were saying that as it was a good thing. What the fuck? It's even not come on time, I'm late. What? Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.